Pittsburgh Steelers got utterly destroyed by the Kansas City Chiefs, 36-10, and you could point to all the different things that went wrong in this game. For Ben Roethlisberger's interception, Diontae Johnson's fumble, Kendrick Green giving up a block or missing a block that allows Ben Roethlisberger to get crushed in the backfield to cause another fumble. It was just problem after problem after problem. And oh, by the way, the other team had Patrick Mahomes, who was just going off. I'm gonna go over all the things I saw wrong with this game, the things that I think are really important, because there's some things I think are just people are just focusing on because they're mad. Steelers fans, I know it's a rough Monday, I know it's a rough Sunday night. Hang in there. I'm here to help you through it. We're gonna talk about that and how the Steelers still can pick themselves up from this loss, even if you may say, I don't care, it's probably over. You probably should care, and I'll explain why. I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. Hit the like button if you're watching this video on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more Steelers content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day. Steelers fans, oh man, I know you going through it. It was a rough one. It was one of those ones where it was just like, okay, come on, guys. No, come on, you can do it. No, okay. All right, nope, that's not going to work either. Okay, this is just all bad. There's nothing here. There's nothing to salvage. That's how it kind of went in this game. 36-10, losing to the Chiefs. You go out here, you punt, you throw an intercept. Both drives after that happens, the Chiefs score immediate touchdowns in the first quarter. The Steelers now, I believe, getting outscored in the first quarter, something like, was it 105-9 or something like that? It's something ridiculous. It's been ridiculous over the last 6 games. But you look at just how this game just played out. A lot of people, a lot of blame can be pointed in a lot of directions. Now, I think a few things here. I'm not as down on the defense as some. Granted, they weren't good in this game. They were picked apart by Patrick Mahomes, but he's Patrick Mahomes. You knew he was going to have his big plays, that he was going to have his moments. But I look at this game and I saw they get up the first touchdown, okay, but then one play later after that touchdown, they're put back on the field. The Chiefs have the ball at midfield. They get another score. Then they were able to force a field goal, and then then they give up the touchdown after the missed field goal drive. But when I was looking back, there were only 2 drives that started past midfield for the Chiefs that they scored touchdowns on, which I was like, wow. I thought they just walked down the field all game long on them. And that's not a moral victory. That's not a silver linings. That's not anything like that. But when I realized, okay, they actually didn't give up all these drives for long yards, but it's like what Mike Tomlin said after the game. They're supposed to get stops on short fields. That's how this team is designed. This defense is supposed to bail out the offense, but we know this defense is hurt up. They haven't been playing well. They've been missing several players all year, and this was a game where you were hoping that that Joe Schobert and Robert Spillane can handle the linebacker position. You saw Ulysses Gilbert getting in there a little bit. You saw Isaiah Loudermilk get the start. It was just problem after problem, and they were not able to keep up with the Chiefs. And the other problem was when the defense did occasionally have a little bit of success, the offense put them right back into tough holes. This is the description of drives for the Steelers before they got a field goal, which was basically a mercy field goal in the third quarter. A punt, an interception, another punt after 5 plays, a missed field goal, a turnover on downs at their own 25, the end of the half, a fumble, and then that field goal, and then, by the way, another fumble after that field goal. It was just abysmal all around. Now, we could point to Matt Canada. We could point to say, hey, I disagree with that call. I'm looking at the tape and I'm seeing, wow, this guy's open, that guy's open, this happens here. It's like what I said last week or a couple weeks ago with the Pittsburgh Steelers with the offense. It's a lot like everyone is to blame at some point. There's times the 4th-and-1 sweep to Najee Harris. I don't know what Matt Canada's thinking. It's just dumb. But when I look at other plays, the play that set that one up, a 3rd-and-4, you had dual shallow crosses. Ray McCloud goes one way, he's kind of covered. Diontae Johnson goes the other way, he's wide open, nobody's in front of him, and he's your best receiver. And Ben Roethlisberger throws it to Ray McCloud, and he gets stopped short. And it's like, why didn't you go to your number one receiver in that situation? I don't understand those moments. Ben Roethlisberger seems to love him some Ray McCloud, and I don't have the official snap counts in front of me, but I'm going to tell you he probably played over 50% of the snaps in this game, and no one understands why. Ray McCloud targeted 8 times in this game, 2nd most on the team over Chase Claypool, Zach Gentry, Najee Harris, and James Washington, who, by the way, had 2 targets in this game. I don't understand the fascination with Ray McCloud, but I'll say this: a lot of people were tweeting about that all game long. I don't think that's the big problem here. I think a part of the issue is the Steelers need a traditional slot receiver. Juju was that. He got hurt. They've been trying to allow other guys to play their outside roles, and it's been a weird thing. And I agree. I think that the Steelers have mishandled that situation, but that's not why the offense is stinking right now. That flea flicker that Ben threw, that's on Ben. Ray McCloud was wide open. If he just throws a bullet to him, doesn't have to air it out, doesn't have to lead him, just throw him the bullet, he catches it, first down. The Steelers move the ball there. There were several instances. There was a 3rd down in the red zone where Ben Roethlisberger has dual screens to the right and left. One screen to his right, one screen to his left. The screen to his right had all of the Kansas City Chiefs defense. The screen to his left had 2 defenders, and you saw the entire defense go that way, and he threw it into that direction. Meanwhile, Diontae Johnson, wide open with several blockers out front and very few tacklers, might have walked into the end zone. And not that would have won them the game, but it would have at least given them a fighting chance when they were actually within range of making it more competitive. And that's been the problem that I've had with the Steelers this season. Whenever games have gotten out of hand, they don't have other ways to save themselves. Whenever they've won games, it's because their defense has played at a ridiculously high level. TJ Watt's getting a lot of sacks. Also, TJ Watt was playing this game with cracked ribs. He's a ridiculous person. They should have never let him even try that. But the bottom line is that when you see the defense having to win all these different times, not one of these games has the offense stepped in and had an immaculate game and saved the defense and said, hey, we got your back. Now, there's times the offense has played better. They've done a better job, but there's never been a game where you're like, man, the offense, wow, they really put it together in this one. It's a lot of it has been the defense creating turnovers, getting them opportunities, giving them shots so that the offense could click. And this was a game where if the Steelers were even going to make it close, the offense was going to need to come out, put together some drives, and at least get some scores early so that it's not like the Steelers are down 21-0 again. And oh yeah, they got to 23-0, 30-0 at one point before the Steelers even could respond on offense. Again, it's what I said before. Matt Canada and Ben Roethlisberger do not mix. I know a lot of people want to fire Matt Canada. I feel rough on saying that because one, I think most coaches or coordinators should get a second year when they have a bad year, unless it's like they're 0-17 or something like that. But when I look at what the Steelers are doing on offense, I see the plays. They're there to be had. It's just execution at the point. And again, it's not just Ben Roethlisberger. Kendrick Green plays horribly. He needs to be benched. He needs to not play center anymore. That's why they put in J.C. Hassenauer at the end. I don't care if they said it was because of an injury. That was why that injury somehow happened right after he blew a block that got Ben killed in the fumble force that gave the Chiefs the ball inside the red zone. By the way, the Steelers held that possession to a field goal. To me, this is there's so many things that are wrong with this offense, and it's the crucial parts that's killing it right now. The offensive line hasn't gelled. It's regressed. It keeps taking steps backwards. Ben Roethlisberger continues to show that he's not adapting. He's not seeing the defenses well enough. I said going into this game, he needed to be able to read the safeties. He didn't. He looked like he was unable to understand where the Chiefs were trying to take away at different points of the game. And then times when he thought he did, he was throwing inaccurate passes. And again, it's not all on him. You had Diontae Johnson with an inexplicable fumble. You had, missed blocks here and there. You had Chase Claypool. Actually, Chase Claypool I can't really point at him that much. He didn't make too many crazy mistakes in this game. Ray McCloud gets called for taunting, even though I did see what he did that was a taunt in this game. Lots of big questions like that happened in this offense, and there's a lot of blame to go around. But the core of this offense that had to be able to save this defense at times and defense that does need help because of how hurt it's been. It has just not been able to rise to the occasion unless it's been, the defense giving them really good field position, them capitalizing on it. Najee Harris making ridiculous plays, Pat Freiermuth making ridiculous plays, and Ben Roethlisberger finding those guys and letting them go to work. It just hasn't been enough this year, and it's clear it's not going to change in the final weeks. But the Steelers somehow aren't out of the playoff race. I want to talk about that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, because I think that that's important to the conversation as far as what's actually coming up. But first, I got to tell you guys about Built Bar. This holiday season, grab the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, or even better than a candy bar. Built Bar, filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor, covered in chocolate, but amazing low in calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat, and high in protein. That means you get the best of both worlds, delicious and healthy. So many flavors, you'll have a hard time choosing between them. If you want raspberry, mint brownie, cherry, double chocolate, cookies and cream, peanut butter brownie, all of those are available when you go to Built.com. Built Bar gives you the extra fuel you need to bust down the mall doors and battle all the holiday shoppers, especially if you're running behind on some of the shopping. So I know some of you out there, some of you guys out there, I know that you waited until after Christmas and now you're sitting out there and like, okay, what deals I could scope out? I know who you are, but listen, when you waited that long, you might be a little tired when you go out there. Take a Built Bar with you to recharge when you go out there. So, but where you can get all these Built Bar flavors, go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15. That's LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your next order. Again, that's LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com, where you can get all those amazing Built Bar flavors. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue to mull through what the heck this offense is and isn't. Ben Roethlisberger, 23 of 35 for 159 yards and a touchdown and an interception. The touchdown comes at the end of the game when the game was basically over. There was a time where Diontae Johnson, I felt like he was right back where he was against Buffalo. He had that fumble, then he had a really bad drop. He had a couple drops in this game. And this is a guy who's been a model of consistency for most of the season, and he hadn't been a detriment to the Steelers. He'd been a major asset to them, and then he put on a performance like this. Now you saw at the end, I do think it's important for Diontae Johnson's touchdown at the end to just be like, hey, okay, I can do this. It's not that my hands are falling apart. I'm not having a mental breakdown right now. I can pick myself up. But that's also kind of a microcosm of what I see the Steelers needing to do moving forward, because I see a lot of people saying, man, the Steelers just need to lose out to get a better draft pick. I'm like, this isn't about just getting a draft pick. This is about team development. It's about a lot of these younger guys. Remember, this team is very young, despite Ben Roethlisberger making it look like they're a lot older because he's the quarterback. This team has a lot of young players on it, and you want these young players figuring things out in these final games, understanding what it's like to be part of a playoff push, understanding what it's like to be part of such a critical game, and how to prepare for that and how to deal with those heights and those rises and those falls. Because if these guys don't learn this lesson now, you're going to be trying to teach them this lesson later in their careers when the Steelers actually do have a team that could be one of the better rosters in the NFL. It's just a fact the Steelers don't have one of the better rosters in the NFL. Somehow, though, they're 7-1. They're still in the playoff hunt. Their chances are a lot slimmer now, though. And this was a week where if they had pulled off the upset, which again I was telling y'all that this was probably wasn't the big thing, but if they had pulled off the upset, they would have been right in the mix for the playoffs. They would have been one of the teams. They might have even been able to clinch the playoffs with a win next week. But now they still get to play. The Browns and the Ravens in the final weeks. I said from the door, the biggest thing about these last three games, they need to beat the AFC North teams. If they can beat the AFC North teams, if they can beat the Browns and the Ravens, they're going to be in a position where they're going to knock the Browns out of the playoffs, and they're going to have a chance to knock the Ravens out of the playoffs. The Ravens play the Rams next week. That's going to be a tough matchup for them. They've been dealing with all the injuries and COVID issues. Now, granted, the AFC North is pretty much locked up now because the Bengals, they beat the Ravens. They just have to win one more game, and then they'll be out of reach of the Steelers, and that'll pretty much be that for the Bengals. But there's still hope for the AFC playoffs. They now need the Steelers. When you look at the standings right now, the Steelers sit as of Sunday night in 10th place. They're 7-7-1 with the wild card teams that are in front of them being the Colts at 9-6, the Patriots at 9-6, the Ravens at 8-7, the Chargers at 8-7, and the Raiders at 8-7. And remember, it doesn't matter who they did or didn't beat because their tie nullifies all the tiebreakers. So what it just matters is over these last 2 weeks, they need to finish with two wins, and they need some of these teams to finish with at least one loss. They do that, and these teams, of course, are the Ravens, the Chargers, or the Raiders. That's where they're kind of at here. All three of these teams have been struggling down the stretch. The Raiders pulled out a big win over the Broncos that basically pushed the Broncos back down. Now, but the bottom line is, before we get to that, any of that other stuff, it's down to basically the Ravens, the Chargers, and the Raiders needing to lose at least one of their last 2 games, and the Steelers winning out. And you think about it, the Steelers, they play the Ravens, that accounts for one of them. You can have it doesn't really matter what the Ravens do with the Rams. If the Steelers win out, they'll knock the Raiders out, or the Ravens out. But the bottom line is this: can the Steelers win their last 2 games? That's a big question after a loss like this. Now, I will remind you, after the Steelers have gotten destroyed a couple times this year, they've actually been able to respond. You look at the loss to the Bengals when they lost 10-41. They came back with the big win over the Ravens. You look at the loss to the Minnesota Vikings 28-36 when they were down by a huge margin. They come back and they beat the Titans. Now, granted, that doesn't seem to bode any well for consistency, but it's something that you can look at if you're a Steelers fan and say, hey, maybe they can bounce back. And the Browns nor the Ravens have been playing well. So we're going to get to how the Steelers can bounce back in just a minute here, because I want to talk about not just the offense, not just the defense, but the overall structure of what this team is. What can Mike Tomlin actually do in these final 2 games? And a lot of the criticism that I do feel is real for the coaching staff, because there's players, we can go about the players, a lot more in what we saw, and I'll go over them when I look more over the tape. But there's things that the coaching staff has to be able to do and solidify when we're talking about, who should stick around moving forward, because there's a lot of talk about fire everybody after losses like this. I want to calm everyone down, get back to focusing, and let's look at the actual picture here for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But first, I got to tell you guys about betonline.ag. BetOnline has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football season continues the march to the playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website or to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use promo code Locked On. That's LOCKEDON, Locked On, to receive your welcome bonus. From basketball to football to NHL to boxing to UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season at BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports, and BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're going to take a step back for a second, because, I'm looking at the hyper-specifics of the game where it comes to, Ben Roethlisberger missing passes, Kendrick Green missing a block here. This is obvious. These are problems that aren't just rearing their heads. They've existed for quite some time now for the Steelers, and they have been able to fix them. When you look at the last, I believe it's now 5 straight games, they haven't scored a touchdown in the first half. That's something that you can't live with and be a good football team. And that's where the Steelers are, though, right now. You look at how they're playing offensively, and they're not able to. Again, this team is very one-sided in that the defense has to carry them to a win, and then the offense occasionally limp its way in, make a big play here or there, and they win off of that. When we're looking at a global approach and how the Steelers need to address things moving forward, I certainly think there should be looks at how the offense is constructed, going into next season. Even with the way how these final games have to play out, if Ben Roethlisberger is not going to see the field, they're just going to have to keep finding a way to grind out these last 2 wins against teams they've already beaten. Maybe they can do that, but there's definitely going to need to be at least a hard look at the way the Steelers have tried to get drives going to begin games, because you just look at the problems that they've had, their inability to start fast, and then that compounds upon itself because then you're putting yourself at risk as the game goes on. The defense starts to see more of what you're doing. Then they could try that. Then if you make a mistake there, it compounds it puts more pressure on the defense to stand up. This is a team that again, we knew the offensive line wasn't going to be very good this year. We knew that if there was hope they were going to become average by the middle part of the season. There was a point where they might have been able to get there, and then it just all fell apart from what we've seen. But Ben Roethlisberger, the biggest thing was you knew is like, hey, if you can find a way to hit the middle of the field to attack and just take the soft spots of the defense, and occasionally not for 400 or 500 yards a game, but just take what the defense gives you and do that in a way that backs the linebackers off so that Najee Harris can get going, you'll be fine. That hasn't happened yet this year. And whatever the plan is for the Steelers moving forward, it has to incorporate some sense of a quarterback who can do just that, because Najee Harris is going to be here to stay. Pat Frymuth's going to be back. You're going to have your pick of how you want to do this offensive line. Personally, I think Kendrick Green has shown you enough at center that it's like, hey, if one of the top tier centers in next year's draft, Tyler Lindenbaum from Iowa, of course, being the top guy there, if one of those guys is available to you, that might be your pick to try to solidify that and say, oh, you know what, Kendrick, thank you. You're going to be a guard from now on. You'll be a backup center in case we need you for emergencies, but we need someone who's really familiar with this position. That's what the Steelers should be looking at right now, as well as, who they're going to bring in at quarterback. I have a problem, again, just dumping Matt Canada, because a lot of these plays I see, they're in front of the Steelers. They're there to be had, but it's execution on the field. But again, when systemic problems come from a lack of execution, then you got to say, okay, this game plan just ain't gonna work, because now you're depending on these players that you've now seen for basically the whole season not come up in big moments for you or not be consistent, for you, and now you're hoping that things can things can turn around, and that's just not a good way to march. Now, I will say this for the Steelers right now, they're kind of pinned because they just, at this point of the season, you have who you have, you're stuck with who you are. But how this season has gone needs to be a lesson for how this team's needs to build moving forward. If you're gonna have a quarterback that's going to play at this level, they can't be taking up $25 million in cap space. You got to find a way to make sure that quarterback is, at least minimalizing how much of their impact is on the salary cap, and then that way you can invest in the offensive line, invest in some depth pieces, and give yourself some opportunities to balance the roster a little bit, because this roster is not balanced. It's tilted heavily on being able to get after the quarterback, and then the guys behind them trying to make big splash plays on defense to turn the game over. Now, all that being said, I don't think that this is a culture problem with the Steelers. You heard about Cam Hayward when he was, I don't know if you saw his post-game interview, but I encourage you to go look it up, because when he was asked, is this just who the Steelers are right now, this inconsistent team that gets beat like this after they lost like this to the Bengals, Cam Hayward said, I'm sorry, but I'm not accepting ish. And you can imagine what I mean when he said ish, because that's how he responded. There are plenty of leaders and pieces on this team. That's what I've been talking about all leading into this game, because I even told you I thought the Steelers were going to lose. I didn't think they'd lose this bad, but I saw this being a week where people were going to be doom and gloom about the Steelers because of, they couldn't beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs with a roster that's arguably, their least talented roster for the past few years. So I look at this as a team and I say, okay, what are the pieces that you can take with moving forward? You got leaders in TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Minkah Fitzpatrick. I think you've got playmakers in Najee Harris, Pat Frymuth, Diontae Johnson when he's not fumbling the ball. And you have players to build on there. You have good role players like Cam Sutton, like Terrell Edmonds. You want to keep them around. Devin Bush can bounce back. We've seen him take strides forward. You're hoping that you can get Stephon Tuitt healthy back someday. Again, that's not going to happen this season. But if it's something that he can come back next year, great. Deal with that then. You have pieces to build around, and you have guys that are fighting at the very end. I mean, you look at Cam Hayward. He's sacking Patrick Mahomes in the fourth quarter. He's still fighting to stuff the run even when the game is over. That's a guy who's not just giving up. He's not just like, you know what? These other guys didn't bring it. We didn't have a good game. I'm just going to go through the motions. He's not doing that. Are there other guys who probably are? Yeah, they're messing up, and you need to address that in the offseason with who you're going to put out there. But this is why you don't tank a season. You want to see the mettle of these players. You want to see the mettle of their character to say, how did you respond when the gates were flooded and everything was overrun? Did you turn around and give up your post, or did you keep fighting on and doing your best so that when we could look back at the film and say, okay, we know we can rely on you? That's what what I see out of guys like even Alex Highsmith. I don't see him quitting on plays. I do see him, getting beat at times, but again, he's a second-year, third-round draft pick. He's going to have some rough games here and there. But you want to see the guys who are fighting through those moments. I think the Steelers do have those guys on the roster. It's just that they're not balanced enough of a team to make up for when the defense is getting beat by a great quarterback like Patrick Mahomes, and also to make up for when your quarterback and your offensive coordinator can't get on the same page and you're still struggling. I did a whole episode about that last Tuesday, just talking about how I just see this as the major point here, that Matt Canada does call occasionally good plays. Example, the flea flicker. Ray McLeod is open. You hit him with a bullet pass, he catches it, he moves on. Or if he drops it, then he drops it, and that's something else that you address and you move forward. There's plenty of plays there. There was a shallow cross where Ben Roethlisberger went to Ray McLeod when Diontae Johnson was open. There was the double screen pass where Ben Roethlisberger went to Najee Harris, where there were like 12 defenders around him when he passed up Diontae Johnson with like 3 defenders around him with several blockers. It's a compound of mistakes. It's a compound of bad things. There's not any one person that's to be all at fault for this. But the problem is that when your offense financially, and you look at the salary cap, it's based around Ben Roethlisberger, and he's not playing that at a high level, that puts you in a really rough spot. So moving forward, I don't think the answer is tearing it all down. I don't think the answer is like, I know a lot of Steelers fans will just burn it to the ground, start all over again, you're going to be throwing away a lot of great talent that you do have that are building blocks pieces that you can turn around very soon. I mean, again, look at the New England Patriots. Yes, they lost this last year, but with a rookie quarterback, they lost this past week. But you look at what they've done with a rookie quarterback like Mac Jones. They're up in the mix. They're competing for the AFC Championship, or AFC East Championship, excuse me, and they're pushing themselves for a playoff spot. There are plenty of teams that have turned things around, and the Steelers will have a good amount of cap space next year to address that. So all I'm saying is that these last 2 games, whether you think that it doesn't matter or not, because yes, if they get to the playoffs, they're probably going to be a wild card team. They're probably going to play a division winner. And who knows, maybe they'll get a matchup like the Bills, a team that they've shown that they can play with. Maybe they'll get a matchup like the Titans, a team that they can show that a team that they've showed that they can play with. But they also might get a matchup like the Chiefs or the Bengals, or teams that have slaughtered them this year. That's all very possible. But the bottom line is the Steelers have to keep fighting. They have to keep seeing who's going to fight to grow and who does grow and learn from these experiences. I often talk about how the best Steelers teams, they often look back at their failures from previous years and they said, man, I'm never going to let that happen again, or I'm going to work my tail off to make sure that never happens again. And then that led to their Super Bowl runs. That's a big part of who this team has to become eventually. They need to go through some battle wars. There's some really big wars coming up against divisional opponents coming up. Those are going to be huge to determine how this team's going to look at who's the most important pieces to build around, what they should do, how they should re-implement things in the draft and free agency, all those things on the line in these final 2 weeks. I'm Chris Carter, the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We appreciate everyone who tunes into the Locked On Steelers podcast. Remember, you can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and of course, YouTube. Hit the like button on our YouTube, on this video if you're enjoying it. Hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel if you're enjoying that as well. Thanks so much to all the people out there that support our work. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. We'll be back more tomorrow with more on the Locked On Steelers podcast after we get some more film review in, some snap counts, looking at the hard data and seeing what's going on with the Steelers, more things that can be addressed in the specifics in their big matchup with the Cleveland Browns on Monday Night Football at Heinz Field next week.